fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The rain over Oakhaven didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. I stood on the precipice of the clock tower, the wind whipping my drenched velvet coat against my legs. I clutched the leather satchel to my chest, its contents far more volatile than my own beating heart. End of the line, Elara. The voice was smooth, like whiskey poured over gravel. Silas, of course it was Silas. I turned slowly, the heels of my boots slipping on the slate. Two figures emerged from the shadows. Silas stood leaning against a gargoyle, daggers drawn but held loosely, his jade eyes cold tonight. And beside him, filling the space like a storm cloud made flesh, was Kaelen. He didn't need a weapon. The bare hands crackling with suppressed pyromancy were promise enough. He was a wall of muscle and scars, all hard lines and raw power that my body registered long before my mind did. "You too are persistent," I shouted over the thunder. "I thought I lost you in the market district." "You almost did," Silas called back, "but Kaelen here has a nose for trouble, and you, darling, smell like a catastrophe dipped in expensive perfume." Kaelen grunted, stepping forward. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the stone and up into the soles of my feet. "Hand it over, Elara. The obsidian egg is unstable." I tightened my grip on the satchel. A void dragon egg, the last of its kind, my only ticket to freedom. "I can't do that, big guy. I have a buyer." "Your buyer is dead," Silas said, his tone losing its playfulness. "The guild turned on you. We're the only way out." I hesitated. Kaelen saw it. He took another step, the heat radiating from him causing raindrops to hiss into steam before they even touched his armor. It was a heat that called to the cold in my bones. He reached into his coat and pulled out a canvas-wrapped object. "Look, nobody wants this," Silas said, gesturing between us. "You give me that egg, I'll give you this one, and everyone goes home without an omelet." I stared at the bundle. "What is it?" "A decoy," Silas smirked, "filled with Kaelen's alchemical fire. Give us the void egg, you take this. By the time the guild realizes it's a fake, you'll be 3 cities away and they'll be, well, on fire." It was too good an offer, especially coming from the king's own hunter mages, but as I looked at Kaelen, at the strange, tortured desperation in his dark eyes, I felt that pull again. A deep, resonant thrum in my gut that had been there since we first crossed paths. It wasn't just fear, it was awareness. "Why help me?" I asked, my voice softer. "Because," Kaelen growled, the fire in his hands dying to an ember, "that egg is reacting to you. I can feel the resonance. If it breaks, this whole city turns to dust." I looked down. The leather of my satchel was hot against my skin, a violet light pulsing through the seams. It was searing me. I hadn't even noticed. "Fine," I whispered. I reached out. Silas tossed the decoy. As it arced through the air, I threw the satchel toward Kaelen. But a sudden, unnatural gale slammed into the tower. The decoy hit my chest, knocking the wind out of me. The satchel fell short. "No," Kaelen roared, lunging. He caught the strap with his fingertips just as it went over the edge, but his momentum on the slick tiles was too great. He went over. "Kaelen!" Silas screamed, diving after him. I didn't think. That cursed magnetic pull took over. I dropped the decoy and lunged, my fingers closing around the hard leather of Silas's boot as he grabbed Kaelen's arm. We formed a terrifying human chain, dangling over the abyss, the weight of 2 grown men tearing at my shoulder. "I can't hold on," I gritted out, my boots sliding on the wet stone. The void egg in Kaelen's hand pulsed, a shockwave of pure, silent force. The gargoyle Silas was anchored to shattered. We fell. Darkness, pain, the smell of ancient dust and ozone. I gasped, sitting up violently, only to be stopped by a heavy weight across my legs. My vision swam. We hadn't splattered onto the cobblestones. The fall had been impossible, yet here we were in the catacombs beneath the city. The void egg must have teleported us. The weight on my legs groaned. It was Silas, sprawled across me, his face buried in the tatters of my coat. Beside us, Kaelen pushed himself up from a pile of rubble, the satchel clutched in his hand. It was glowing brightly now, a steady, rhythmic violet thrum. "Silas," I rasped, my throat dry, "get off." He stirred, pushing himself up on his elbows. He looked dazed. "Elara, you're alive, unfortunately." Kaelen limped over, his intense gaze sweeping over my body, checking for injuries I couldn't yet feel. The sheer size of him was overwhelming in the enclosed space. "You held on," he said, his voice rough with surprise. "You caught Silas." "I have bad reflexes," I muttered, trying to untangle myself from Silas, acutely aware of the hard muscle of his thigh pressed against my hip. "Bad reflexes saved us," Silas winced, clutching his ribs. "The magic cushioned the fall, but your grip kept us within its radius. If you'd let go, we'd be paced." "We need to move," Kaelen said, his voice grim. The heat coming off him was different now, not just pyromancy, but body heat. I could smell leather, rain, and the distinct musk of a man who dealt in violence. The displacement flare will attract things. "I can't," Silas hissed, trying to stand and failing. "My leg, it's broken." Kaelen cursed softly. He handed me the glowing satchel. "Hold this." Then he scooped Silas into his arms as if he weighed nothing. The fierce, tender protectiveness between them made my chest ache with something I refused to name. "Lead the way, thief," Kaelen commanded, nodding to a tunnel. We walked for what felt like hours, the air growing colder, a bone-deep chill that gnawed at my soul. "It's the void chill," Silas murmured, his head on Kaelen's shoulder. "The egg, it consumes heat." "I'm freezing," I admitted, my teeth chattering. "We stop here," Kaelen said abruptly, finding a small alcove. He set Silas down gently before turning to me, his expression unreadable. "We need to share heat. My fire magic can counter the chill, but only if we are touching. It needs a conduit." My mind raced, to be pressed against that furnace of a body. "You want us to cuddle?" I asked, skepticism warring with a shiver of something that wasn't entirely from the cold. "I want us to survive," Kaelen said. He sat, pulling the injured mage against his chest. Then he opened his other arm, his dark eyes locking onto mine. An invitation, a demand. I crawled into the space beside him. He wrapped his massive arm around me, pulling me flush against his hard side. The contact was an electric shock. He was a furnace, and I was starving for warmth. I let out a shaky breath, my head resting on the solid wall of his pectoral muscle, the slow, powerful thud of his heart echoing through me. Silas was on his other side, a tangle of limbs and wet clothes, bound by lethal magic. I could feel the tension in every muscle of Kaelen's body as he held us both. Just as my shivering subsided, a sound echoed from the darkness. Skittering like 1,000 claws on stone. Kaelen stiffened, his arm tightening around me possessively. Silas's hand found my knee, his grip tight. "Chitin stalkers," Kaelen whispered, the vibration of his voice a terrifying comfort against my skin. "Dozens of them." The skittering grew louder, a cacophony of clicking mandibles and scraping claws. The violet light of the egg cast long, dancing shadows that made the darkness seem alive. "Kaelen," Silas whispered, his voice strained. "You can't fight them all and suppress the void chill." "I know," Kaelen's voice was a low growl against my ear. His arm remained an iron band around me. "I can fight," I said, reaching for the daggers in my boot. "No," Kaelen commanded, the sound vibrating straight to my core. "You stay between us. You have the resonance." "The what?" "The egg didn't kill us because it likes you, Elara," Silas explained, his hand finding mine in the dark. His fingers were long and calloused, their touch surprisingly gentle as they laced with mine. "You're a catalyst, use it." Before I could ask how, the first stalker emerged from the shadows. Kaelen released me, surging to his feet. He clapped his hands together and a whip of orange flame lashed out, striking the creature. It shrieked, but 3 more poured out of the darkness, then 6. "Silas' shield," Kaelen roared, unleashing a torrent of fire. Silas gritted his teeth, raising a hand. A translucent green barrier shimmered into existence around us, but it flickered. He was too weak. I looked at the egg, pulsing wildly now, matching my frantic heartbeat. Resonance. Something inside me, a barrier I hadn't known was there, crumbled. I crawled towards the egg. "Elara, don't touch it directly," Silas yelled. I ignored him. I placed both hands on the searing leather of the satchel. A cold so profound it burned rushed up my arms, into my chest, and then out. I screamed, not in pain, but of power. A shockwave of violet energy erupted from me. It passed through Silas's shield, through Kaelen, and slammed into the swarm of stalkers. They didn't burn. They simply stopped, frozen in time, encased in violet crystal. Silence slammed back into the cavern. I slumped forward, gasping, and strong hands caught me. "Kaelen," he pulled me up, turning me to face him. His eyes were wide, pupils blown black with adrenaline and awe. "You're a void witch," he breathed, his voice raw. He looked as if he was unsure whether to kiss me or arrest me. I didn't know," I trembled. "That explains the attraction," Silas murmured from the floor, a wry smile on his pale lips. "Void calls to fire and to earth." Kaelen ignored him, his focus entirely on me. The air was thick, charged with residual magic and the terrifying closeness of death. He cupped my face, his rough, warm hands sending a jolt through my entire body. "You saved us." "We're not out yet," I whispered, my gaze dropping to his lips. He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. The heat from him was dizzying. "No, but now we know what you are, and I'm not letting anyone else have you, not the guild, not the king." "Possessive," I breathed, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Protective," Silas corrected. He had dragged himself closer, leaning his head against Kaelin's thigh, looking up at me with eyes that promised trouble. "We come as a set, darling. You bind the void, Kaelin brings the fire, and I provide the strategy." My breath caught, Kaelin's thumb stroked my cheekbone, a slow, deliberate caress that felt like a brand. I wanted to lean into him, to taste the fire that rolled off him in waves. But then the ground shook. A massive shadow fell over us from the far end of the tunnel. A figure in the sleek, silver armor of the Royal Inquisition stepped into the light. "Well, well," a cold, metallic voice echoed. "The thief, the traitor, and the cripple, and you found the battery for my doomsday machine." Kaelen spun, shielding me and Silas, his sword finally sliding from its sheath with a ring of steel. "Inquisitor Vane," Kaelen snarled. "Hand over the girl and the egg," Vane said, raising a gauntlet that hummed with dark necromancy, "or I bury you all in this tomb forever." Kaelen didn't hesitate, he moved with a speed that defied his size. "Silas, take her," he roared, launching himself at the Inquisitor. Fire and green necrosis collided, the shockwave rattling the teeth in my skull. Silas grabbed my hand, adrenaline overriding his pain. "We have to flank him. Can you do that again, the blast?" "I don't know," I yelled over the din. "I just touched it." "Then touch it again," Silas shoved the satchel into my arms, "but aim it this time." In the center of the cavern, Kaelen was a whirlwind of steel and flame, but Vane was absorbing his fire, growing more monstrous. Kaelen took a hit, a blast of green energy that sent him skidding backward, his armor smoking. "No," I screamed, fear spiked and with it the connection to the egg. It wasn't cold this time, it was hunger. The egg wanted to feed on Vane's power. I ripped the egg from the satchel. It was a sphere of pure obsidian, veined with violet light. I held it up, channeling every ounce of my terror and rage into it. "Eat," I screamed. The egg didn't blast energy, it inhaled it. A vortex of shadow opened above my head, ripping the necromantic energy from Vane. He shrieked as his power was stripped away, leaving him just a man in metal. Kaelen saw the opening. He lunged, his broadsword flashing, and knocked the Inquisitor unconscious. The vortex collapsed, the egg dropped from my numb fingers. The world tilted, Kaelen caught me. Silas limped over, collapsing beside us. We were a pile of bruised, battered bodies on the floor of a tomb. "You," Kaelen panted, looking down at me with awe and something darker, hungrier. "You stripped a grand Inquisitor of his magic." "I think the egg did it," I whispered, leaning into his warmth, feeling utterly drained. "You commanded it," Silas said softly. He reached out, his hand covering mine where it rested on Kaelin's chest. "We are in so much trouble." "We're alive," Kaelen said, his gaze moving between us. "We need to get to the surface, to the safe house in the crags." We emerged into the gray dawn and found a hidden cabin. Once inside, Kaelen tended to Silas's leg with practiced efficiency. I stood by the fire he'd lit, watching him. When he finished, he walked over to me. He didn't speak, just stood there, a mountain of a man smelling of smoke and blood and victory. "You stayed," he said quietly. "You could have run." "We had a deal," I said, my voice unsteady. "No omelets." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He reached out, running a rough thumb over my lower lip. The touch was electric, a promise. "Silas and I are fugitives now, bound to you. The magic of that egg linked us. I can feel you, in my blood." My breath hitched. "What do you feel?" He stepped closer, crowding me against the wall until all I could feel was his heat, all I could smell was him. "I can feel your heartbeat. I can feel your want." And what do I want? Kaelen leaned down, his lips brushing my ear, his breath a hot caress on my skin. You want to not be alone anymore, and you want to know if the fire burns as hot in the bed as it does on the battlefield. I swallowed hard, my gaze flickering towards Silas, who watched us from the cot with knowing, jade-green eyes. Maybe, I whispered. Kaelen kissed me then. It wasn't gentle. It was acclaiming, hot, deep, and tasting of survival and desperation. I melted into him, my hands tangling in his hair, kissing him back with all the fight I had left. From the cot, I heard Silas groan, a sound of frustration and raw promise. Kaelen pulled back, breathless, his forehead resting on mine. Rest now, he commanded softly, but tomorrow. Tomorrow, I breathed. Tomorrow we figure out how to tame a dragon, Silas called out, his voice laced with weary amusement, and how to share. I looked at the obsidian egg, then at the two men who had hunted me, saved me, and now looked at me like I was the only treasure in the world. Tomorrow, I agreed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't running, I was home.